Welcome back, everybody, to the Uncommon Element. I am very excited to bring Burton Hughes, my special guest today, author of Align Your Empire, best-selling author, actually, on New York Times, which is something that not a lot of people accomplish, my man. Very cool, very cool. But you're a serial entrepreneur. You do a lot of things in your life, including being a girl dad.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting dynamic, right? You've got to manage a lot of things throughout your life, and you've been incredibly successful in your career, both, from a fitness perspective, but also from a business perspective, and, from a personal brand to even your own brand in the roofing industry, and also being an investor. So I'm very excited to dig into your story today. And if I could ask you one question, my man, I could start this off, is what do you think makes you uncommon?
It's really funny you say that, because I'll answer it perfectly. So I think I'm a good blend of book smart, street smart, uncommon sense, and common sense, right? And I always like to say uncommon sense, because when a lot of people would tell me to zig, I would zag, right? I've always it's not that I was always defiant. It's not like I operate from like a reckless abandon, but I would definitely say, even since a young child, I always would challenge. It's not that I would challenge authority, but because I said so never really fit well with me. Just because I said, what I mean? It was just, there was a certain things that my young mind didn't comprehend, like, go do this. Well, why do I need to? Well, because I said so. Like, that never sat well with me. But what always worked well with me is I need to know why I'm doing something, not how. Like, I'll figure out the how, just tell me why, so my mind can comprehend what is the plan. Because from there, even at a younger age, I was learning to optimize things. Like, if there was a task at hand, I was always trying to find a way in my young mind, right, with my young capacity, is to how can I get things done quicker so I can get to do what I want to do, right? Because either way, you're going to have to work, but how can I optimize it? How can I combine? How can I condense time? And that's where I think the uncommon element came from. And really, my entire life, I've always kind of operated from that angle. And at times it served me well. Sometimes, it bites you in the ass, high risk, high reward. But
sure.
I would say that's my answer. And I would absolutely say that was what makes it uncommon, brother.
Man, there's a lot to unpack in that, right?
Yeah.
And I appreciate you sharing that, because it is a special blend of what I'm starting to find as more commonalities within the people that, we know, right, is that search for independence, and the search for, like, really our own. I've gone through the same struggle myself, right, of finding my own independent thought, finding my own person, my own personality. And it seems like you were able to do that more at a younger age. And can you talk about kind of what led you down that road?
Yeah, so I grew up a little different than most. I think a lot of people assume one thing. I do carry myself pretty different. Like the person you're sitting in front of today is a little more confident than I've always have been. And I think that's just through some of the self-development and honestly just age and growing up. But as a young child, like I said, I was very kind of defiant towards authority. And when you're like that and you're different scares people. So I was also in trouble quite a bit, so, the biggest things for me is that, throughout my life, like growing up, like, my mom was married like 11 times or something like that. Crazy. Parents, divorced before I was even one. And not that that's different than anyone else, because a lot of people come from the broken home, but I think the dynamics that I had gone through, I had a brother that was dealing drugs out of the house. And unfortunately, my brother was, murdered in a drug deal gone wrong. I've lost another brother to suicide. So, I've seen a little bit. We had drive-by shootings at my house. A lot of things that I could have played victim to, where I think God blessed me with kind of a dreamer mindset, because even though I was living through those things, and I was experiencing things that maybe I shouldn't, that maybe accelerated my young mind, because I always feel like I always call myself Peter Pan because I have like kind of younger look. But I think some of that is because I've been kind of like a duck. And when, like when a duck gets water splashed on, they shake the water off, right? I've always been able to shake when adversity comes my way. I've always just challenged it, accepted it. I always like to say I kind of chew it up and eat it. But I've always been one that, even when shit is going bad, God blessed me with a dreamer mindset that I've always been able to, even when shit is on fire around me, I'm still knowing that I'm still in a fight. I'm still alive. Always just had like the belief that everything's going to work out. As long as I keep my cool and I keep focused, all things come to an end, and even now, I used to be crippled with anxiety and just things that everyone experiences, and depression and things that you have. But once I found that as long as I could just get everything done I can possibly do today, tomorrow will take care of itself. And that's kind of a play on words that I do with my faith. So hopefully that answered your question. But that, from dysfunction, I've learned to manage the way, things happen to you. Things happen, bad things happen, right? But I think sometimes things happen for you. So I feel like in a way I've experienced those things so that I can be more empathetic to others moving forward, which makes me more well-rounded. I'm sure a physician would have a field day with that, right? A psychiatrist, but that's classic this. But for me, man, I just kind of take things as they come. I process the information and I don't play victim to it, because I always try to find the solution. And everyone goes through shit. Everyone's got a story. Not one's more than others, so it's just how we react and how we build from there, and how we keep pressing forward. So,
yeah. I mean, you touched on a lot of really cool points in that, between anxiety, depression, and maintaining that dreamer mind state, right? A lot of people lose that, I think, very early on, and it's hard to embrace and push through that. I'm actually one of those people, right? I was following other people's expectations of me during the earlier part of my life. And I was having this conversation today with somebody, actually, on an interview, where I was like, I have plaques on my wall from being an All-American, but I look at those and I realize that was me trying to make my dad proud as much as it was an accomplishment in someone else's eyes. It was always someone else, right? And I always wanted to be an entrepreneur from the time I was 16, and it took me until I was 30 to finally take the leap. So I'm curious, how did you maintain and embrace that dreamer mind state, right, through all of that adversity that you went through?
I think you're born with you're kind of born with it, I mean, you have like your personality traits. So I'm sure when you go to work for companies, they do the personality trait testing. If they don't, then you may want to look at the company that you're working for. But a lot of these companies that I've worked for, I started my first big boy job was new home sales. And then obviously became a realtor and, manager, a custom builder. But I think it all started when I was in like the 5th grade, man. I grew up in a single wide trailer in a trailer park. I mean, not nice by any means. I mean, but I needed to make some money. I wanted to make some money. So I've always been into like motorcycles and cars and stuff like that. And I know I was in 5th grade because I was 5 years old going into kindergarten. So it was like that in between end of the summer, getting ready to start school. And if it was these Reebok pumps, I don't know what it was. There were these shoes that were $100 that I wanted, like I absolutely wanted. And I'm like, where I come from, I mean, that's just not, I ended up getting them, but I needed to make some money. So what did I do? I cut up my motocross magazines and made like these collages. They probably looked like crap, but I took construction paper, I cut up these motocross magazines and I glued and made these collages, right? In my young entrepreneurial mind, I made like, I don't know, a few of them. And I literally technically I made my first product and took it to the market. And I literally went knocking door to door, trying to sell these collages. And the funny thing is I don't think I sold any. but I think some of my neighbors like probably were like, wow, look at this kid. I made a few bucks just because I think they appreciated my young, entrepreneurial spirit. So like, that's, I think, is where it started. And then, you would have those candy bar selling things when you're in middle school. I always sold them. I always did. I ate a lot too. Don't get me wrong. I ate a lot of them. And I sold a lot of them here, but don't get it twisted. So I just think at a young age, man, I just was always trying. It was almost like a hustle, but no one told me, hey, cut these up, go sell it. I just, man, like, how does that come to a kid that's like, 5 years old? And then when I was in high school, I was, again, always reaching up. I started caddying, and I kind of layered that in. So I want to tell this story within a story just to kind of give you an idea, because you asked me what is my uncommon thinking. Well, in high school, like I said, I grew up, I didn't really know we were poor. I mean, we weren't like desolate, right? But I mean, just like an average family getting by, So I started thinking, like, where can I make money? And I heard caddying, like carrying golf clubs, you make a lot of money. And if anyone listening to this podcast has ever seen the movie Caddyshack, Bushwood was the name of the show, and all that stuff. Like, it's absolutely hilarious. However, the country club that I worked at, Scioto Country Club, is where Jack Nicklaus learned to play golf. Bushwood is literally like the embellished version, like personification of Scioto Country Club, like all of the stereotypes. I mean, it's
that's awesome.
Bushwood is literally like Scioto Country Club in real life. But the moral of the story is, as I caddied, I learned a lot about myself. But the biggest thing that I learned is like, I didn't have a ride there. Both my parents worked. So I was either like, say hitchhiking, but getting car rides from my friends and just trying to put it together. There wasn't no Uber back then. But I knew that I had to get up at 6:30 in the morning because I needed to be at the golf course by 7, because the first rounds would start at 7:30. And even though you got to the golf course and we're in the Caddyshack, literally, waiting to get out, it didn't necessarily mean that you're going to get around to make money. The earlier you are that you were there was better chances. So there was no guarantees, but if you were there early and you're prepared, chances were in your favor to get out. That makes sense.
Yep.
So what I learned is, if I got up early, attack the day in the summer, in the spring, when everyone else wants to, screw off, I was at the golf course at 7, was getting out on the golf course at 7:30, caddying. I'd make anywhere from 50 to 150 bucks. I'd be done by 11:30 noon. And then all of my friends that thought it would be a good idea to sleep in and screw off in the mornings, they wanted to go to the pool. So what I did is I'd have $150 in my pocket, and I still got to go to the pool all day. So how I looked at it is, how can I make up time within time? Again, it wasn't something revolutionary. It was just something that my mindset is, I'm not going to pick one or the other. I want to have both. So if I want to have both, then I'm going to get my ass up. I'm going to get in front of this day, and I'm going to be self-supportive. I was able to buy my own clothes, do everything things that I wanted to do, and still have the leisure time. So that's when I started learning. You make your own time, you make your own money, you make your own shots. So
damn. I did not know we had that in common, by the way. So actually, that was my first job.
No shit. Okay.
Yeah. At Wayne Country Club.
Yeah. So you start as a B caddy, and then you go to A, and then you become an honor caddy. And man, I learned a lot about myself. I learned that, people in sales is the one making the money, man. I had no idea we were poor. And so I was sitting in like the bag room, and I remember like, hey, can you go sit in the bag room? I was like, what do I got to do? They're like, take the golf bag out of the trunk and sit it on the ground. And then the guys will come up and take it. Dudes are flipping me $20, like, just for like taking the bag out and sitting on the ground. I'm like, this is awesome. I mean, you got to think, money. I'm 15, 16, dude. I hundreds of dollars I would make, and I didn't tell anyone. I had my own money. I didn't even tell my parents. Like, they had no idea. I made $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 over a couple of months. I mean, that's a lot of money when you're young. Yeah. So that's awesome, dude. I didn't know that. That's hilarious.
Yeah. I kept mine in a shoebox in my closet. Just stacks of cash.
Rubber bands. I thought I was a drug dealer, but I was just, but I mean, I weighed probably 115 pounds. So you used to see my ass. I always liked to be a 4 caddy. A 4 caddy, you just ran out and you threw the marking towels. But I remember carrying 2 tour bags, man. I mean, I probably looked like freaking Calvin and the Hobbes out there, carrying bags. I mean, I was little, but my heart was mighty and I worked hard. So
those things are heavy, by the way. Double bagging when you're that young is heavy. And then you got like senior guys out there with you, like, you're sweating all day. right? These bags weigh like 50, 60, maybe 70 pounds, depending on
Collectively, they weighed more than I did. 100%. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And you're carrying them for what, 5 miles, man. I mean, it's a great workout, but like you said, that great lesson in that was, there was seniority in it. The guys who got there early and were there consistently were always getting out, and they would come back with hundreds upon hundreds of dollars. And that sparked it in my mind. I was like, no, yeah, I want to do that. I definitely want to do that. It's worth it.
Yeah. And at the time, like it's funny when you're kind of in it, you don't really think about, man, a lot of the life lessons that I've learned, just talking about it just now. I mean, I guess I really learned a lot just from, getting up, getting early. And like you said, I guess I never thought about it, but when you would start caddying for people, then they would start requesting you. And then when you start getting requested, they start working with you. And then next thing you know, it's just, I don't know. I just learned a lot about myself. I learned, like I said, really how to collapse the time. But also with that, if you work hard, you make like double bagging was hard, but you also made double the money, Yep. So it was one of those things. If you put the work in, you immediately get the result. So,
yeah. That is very cool. That is very cool, man. And I appreciate you sharing that story. I had no idea that, the more I get into it, the more in common actually that you and I have, just from some of the background stuff. But you had mentioned something earlier that I wanted to tackle with you because I love motorcycles. I love fast cars.
Yeah.
My dad actually got into a very bad motorcycle accident when he was younger. Maybe promised to stop riding motorcycles. Unfortunately, which in honor of my dad, I did that. But where I'm going with this is you embraced fear. You've embraced fear from an early on stage in your life, right? Mm-hmm. Getting up, cutting out those construction paper, making those collages and knocking on doors. That takes an incredible amount of courage to go out there and do that, which just seems like it's transferred throughout your life. And I'm curious, man, how do you go about embracing your fear? Because I guarantee there are a lot of people listening to this that have a very hard time with that.
Here's the deal. We all have fear, and I mean, this is probably one of my favorite questions I've ever had because, you're scared. And when you're young, you're afraid of the boogeyman, in your closet, right? Or the monsters under the bed, but see, when you get older, the fear, they say fear is an acronym, right? Or it's false evidence appearing, real. But I think the boogeyman that we all, and the fear that we have now lies in the doubt. It's not necessarily fear like you're scared, but it's fear of being seen or being exposed or being not good enough. But really it's the boogeyman when you're older is lives in doubt. So even more than fear is the self-doubt, the I don't know about anyone listening to this, but I didn't know it was a thing because again, when you're older and you're an adult and you're a man, like you don't tell people like this really makes me nervous because like, oh, you're weak, like, So as men, we need to talk about like, sometimes like, hey, I'm going through some shit, I need some help, or whatever. But like I said, the doubt that creeps in, but it also like the narrative in your mind, if you're getting ready to step out and do something good, there's always the thing in your brain that's going to want to protect you, whether you're going 200 miles an hour or doing something for the first time. Like your body always wants to protect itself. And that is like literally wanted to protect itself, but also, protect yourself on social media. Maybe there's something you want to post or whatever it may be. Your body is always going to go, you may want to think about this. And a lot of times people freeze. And one thing that I know is I had 4 older brothers growing up, and I absolutely would get wrecked by them. Not like bullying, but like big brother stuff, right? And, But I learned that when I would, they all played football, so I ended up playing football. But I knew that when I would play scared or I wasn't all in, those are when the times I would get hurt. It was when I was trying to take it easy. It was when I was trying to not run as fast where I was, or when I'm going to tackle this person, if I didn't execute and use the right technique, if I was trying to go light, it always seemed like those were the times that I would get hurt. So how I started processing it, and I know like people are like, I don't care about football, bro. It is, I don't know about that. Hear me out. Technique and making sure you're sticking to the principles and not being scared I wouldn't get hurt. But the thing is even if I half-ass it, there's a chance I would get hurt. Even if I use all the technique in perfect form, there's a chance I could get hurt. So either way, my thing is go all in. When you ride motorcycles, you take the, if you race motorcycles, you're in fast cars, you inevitably take the risk that you're going to get hurt. But my thing is either way, there's going to be an outcome. You can control everything. You can be afraid, but a lot of times people end up hurting themselves based on fear because they're not all in. So if they're getting ready to start a business, they always have a contingency plan. You hear them say like burn all the ships. Like, yeah, I mean, there always needs to be contingency. But I think a lot of times people are just afraid to go all in. And in their mind, the fear that I feel that they have more than anything is not the fear of like life and death. Like a lot of our decisions these days aren't like, we're not in the wild frontier, right? We're like, you're literally life and death situations.
Yeah. This isn't 1883 right now.
Yeah. You're not like trying, you hear me out. So a lot of times I think this is going to hit a lot of people hard is I think a lot of people, when they're starting out on the entrepreneur, or maybe they're like an intrapreneur. I mean, I'll talk about that here in a little bit too. But I think a lot of people are like, what if I go all in on this for 10 years and I build it and it doesn't work? That's their fear. So a lot of times they just get stuck because they're playing through all the what ifs. And you asked about like the no fear or whatever. Like for me, when I was like in kindergarten or going into kindergarten and I was 5, man, see, the thing is life hasn't kicked me yet. I was blissfully unaware that you don't just go knock people's doors. Like you don't, as a kid, like you say what you think. That's what you do. And that's why like, oh, you can't say that because you don't process that, right? That's like over time you learn. So I think a big thing for me, even now, is I think then I do before I think. A lot of times we overthink things. Humans overcomplicate everything. So a lot of times like imperfect action now will always be waiting because you can literally, I call it mental masturbate. I don't know if that's necessarily like the right PG thing to say, but I think
this is not PG. Don't worry.
You know what I mean? But the thing is, I think a lot of people talk and contemplate all this shit, but they can contemplate and do all this stuff. And then like, they never take action. So how I look at it is like, I take the information that I have and I make a decision quick because even imperfect action is still, going to give me a result. I'm not talking about reckless abandon. I'm just talking about sometimes if you have enough information, you just need to go work some shit out. So door-to-door sales, we do a lot with door-to-door sales. We got a roofing and solar company. So door-to-door sales is part of that. But a lot of it is just letting people know, hey, we're going to be working on your neighbor's house. It's going to be really noisy. So a lot of it is like just letting people know. But you would just be really, really surprised as like people really have a hard time just going and knocking doors or whatever. And what is that fear? It's our own mind. Like, what are they going to get? Yeah, are they going to get mad or whatever? Who cares? Like, you're just going and knocking the door. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? They're going to tell you, go fuck yourself. And after a few of those is really not that bad. So I think
it gets easier.
Yeah. Honestly, like I always call them GFYs, but I think the biggest thing, fear is real, but I think a lot of times is, are you afraid? Do you have the fear? Is it like literally a life or death situation? Or is it just something that you're mentally stuck? Maybe you don't have enough information. Maybe you just need to step out and just get some progress. Maybe you've been sitting on an idea for a couple of years and you're stuck. But the thing is like you can get stuck and you'll never get out of it. Worst case that happens is you fail. So my thing is you can sit and worry about it, or you can not do anything and you fail, or you could take a shot at it. And again, you could fail that way too, but at least you have more information to go off of to get better. So either way, my thing is I think always just taking the action and typically imperfect action, we're going to get you some type of result, which will give you data, which then will allow you to make a better decision moving forward.
Yeah. That's a great way to look at it. I look at it actually, I learned how to framework that of, implement, analyze, adjust, evolve. Right.
Yeah.
And making sure, and we do that. I've done that in my businesses for a long time now. Is cool. I got enough information, like you said. I can read all the books in the world, but unless I take action and get real life experience, I'm never going to really know what my capabilities are, what my confidence level, what momentum I can create right within that, so I can overcome that fear. Because sometimes you just get so damn sick of yourself or
Yeah.
sick of like not taking that action that you're just like, nope. The fear of not taking action overcomes your fear of taking action and moves you forward in whatever area of your life that you're trying to overcome an obstacle.
And that's where doubt creeps in. And I've had, I really want to talk about, you had said kind of the depression and anxiety thing. Those are certain things that I've battled, and I definitely want to touch on those.
Sure.
But when there's doubt and fear, they're all different, but they're kind of intertwined in a way. And like I said, you know, you get a lot of people in a lot of our groups, you hear about people talking about like doing 75 hard, they want to lose weight or they want to work on a specific thing. Right. And they self-sabotage. And the reason they self-sabotage is they don't believe, like they just don't have the belief. They have the doubt, the fear of, if I put all this work in and it doesn't work. You see, it's all kind of intertwined. And for me, a lot of the things is, I never always have a hard time I have all these ideas, right? And sometimes I have a hard time saying it, even after I've written a book, like one of those things. But I've never regretted a decision that I've made. And it wasn't like any decision I've made right or wrong. Like I was absolute in my decision because I was basing off the facts that I had at the time. So whether I turn right or left or you zig or you zag, well, sometimes you'll know if you make the wrong turn, well, guess what? Like you're going to figure that out real quick. So then you can pivot and you can adjust. And that's where you're talking about adapt. So again, just coming back to anxiety, you know, if you make the wrong decision, you can fix it. Getting stuck, it's a permanent stuck. But at the same time, the confidence, if you're not keeping your commitments to yourself, so you're saying, hey, I'm going to do 75 hard, or I'm going to commit to lose this weight, or I'm going to start this business, and then you don't do it, you just let yourself down. You just broke the promise to yourself. What do you think that's going to do to your self-confidence? What do you think that's going to do with fear? Because if you can't keep your commitments to yourself, how can you promise anything to anyone else? How can you have a business partner? How could you lead a company if you're risk averse and you're fear and you're afraid because you have all this anxiety? Is because we can get stuck. So if anyone's listening to this right now, I promise you, imperfect action is always going to be better. And if you get everything done, I used to have what's called like situational anxiety. It wasn't like a brain imbalance. I know they had like, there's always things that go back and forth talking about chemicals. For me, there's certain times in my life I had more situational anxiety and depression, not clinical. It's different. A lot of it came down to I was selling myself short. I was taking my foot off the gas. I was trying to settle in. You know, I was always an entrepreneur. When you're an adult, you get kicked down a couple of times. You start thinking about taking maybe that W-2 job because it's safe. There's a security net and everyone around you. So a lot of times that anxiety is going to creep in because you're not really stepping up and being the person that you're supposed to be. And a lot of it is just because we overcomplicate things and really just need to make sure, you know, when you're when you're in the thick of it, making sure that everything that you can get done, stop putting things off tomorrow. Literally try to create that list and get everything you can get done today because tomorrow will take care of itself. I said that earlier, but man, that's how I really compartmentalize every day is what can I get done today? Cool, that's it. And then tomorrow we'll just start again. And a lot of that anxiety kind of started flushing it out when I started processing information like that.
Yeah. Stop thinking about the end result, right? And you're just thinking about that daily process of getting there.
Because the daily process gets you the result. But it's just every day at a time. The end result will take care of itself. As long as you're doing the work today, tomorrow will take care of itself 100%.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you have brought up an interesting point, right? And I want to dive into this a little bit more is, you know, lack of belief or someone's lack of self-belief is holding them back from taking that imperfect action, right? And realizing that they can learn that lesson and adapt and move on because, you know, call it failure, call it lesson, whatever you want to do. It's teaching you something that is bringing you more like awareness and experience in your life that is going to help you catapult yourself farther along. Yeah. Right. And you hear a lot about mission and driving towards a specific place, right? But a lot of people have a really hard time identifying what that place is, or coping with the fact that it may change, by the way, if as you go along, right?
Sure.
The destination may not change, but the course is going to change. You're going to have to course correct throughout the entire journey.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Whatever you want. But have you ever kind of thought about like what is your definite aim, like the legacy you're trying to leave behind and that horizon that you're shooting towards?
I have. And the thing is you're right. I forget what it is. I got to look up the statistic, but when they talk about like when a jet takes off from New York City and is supposed to land in, LA, it's constantly adjusting its course because of the wind. And, I'm not a pilot, but it's like 1,000 times that it has to auto correct. It's not like it just flies straight. It flies like this the whole way. So right. I think the misconception is a lot of times people think that, okay, this is what I want. This is the end result. And like, this is there's only one way to get there. Well, I mean, you can take the scenic route, you can take the expressway, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. I think a lot of people are walking around frustrated. Again, they have this anxiety, they're frustrated, but when you come down and ask them why they're frustrated, a lot of times I'm an executive coach in one of the mastermind groups that you and I are in. And I ask people, they're just, you see it, you can almost see it on their face. And I think that's like the empathy thing, me growing up and going through some things, I can see it, the worry and the stress on someone's face. And a lot of times I see people and I listen to them and I listen to, what they're going through. And I ask them, what do they want? What do you want? And it almost is like it's almost like I smacked them on the forehead and it's like, well, like a reality check, because here they're frustrated, right? But they don't even know why they're frustrated. Like they have this business and they have this idea, but what do you want? Like, do you want to make a lot of money and you want to do all this kind of stuff? Or like, okay, like that's fine too. If that's what you want, like more power to it. Or is there a mission? Like, what is it that you want? And most people can't answer that. They don't know, like they have this idea, but like I said, life maybe kicked them down. Maybe they had a divorce or whatever it may be. But when I start asking people, what do they want? It's a very uncomfortable question. And one thing that I think, really helped me is, in life, there's a lot of variables and then you have controls. Like I said, in a young age, like I didn't have a lot of confidence. I was always undersized, right? And I got bullied like in school, like everyone does, but the thing is, I just didn't have the confidence. Like I said, I was always kind of undersized, and coming from where I did, I was always kind of counted out. I remember my teachers my senior year, and I had these lofty ideas, and they're like, you might want to, tone that down. I don't want you to just set yourself up for, disappointment, but people where you come from, that's really not realistic. We need to sit down and really get serious about, what you want. And you want to talk about like, pouring, water on my flame. But it is what it is. So like I said, a lot of times you get kicked down and, you maybe get some setbacks. But for me, it didn't matter how much, money I made, as I couldn't buy confidence. And like I said, if you've been kicked down a few times, or like I said, had a divorce or a business deal gone bad, it's gonna rattle you. It's gonna shake your confidence. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's gonna sound silly because I ended up taking on this fitness thing. I ended up saying, okay, the market was getting kind of weird in 2007 and 2008. So I was, realtor I was number one producer doing my thing, but I never felt 100% confident in like my physical stature. And maybe that's an ego thing, but this is something I needed to address. I hired a trainer and a dietitian, and I started to go to work on myself because, see, in life, you've got the variable, you've got, deals and closings that are blowing up, and deals and negotiations and closings and, all of it, the good, the bad, the ugly that happens. But the thing is, the control is what I had for my fitness. I could control how I trained. I could control the food that I consumed. I could control my schedule, because when there's a lot of noise, if you lean on your discipline, it seems to mute things a little bit. It doesn't completely make them go away. It just turns the volume down a little bit and allows you to stay focused. So some of the really toughest times is when I lean in on my schedule. I'm a very detailed, scheduled person. I pretty much rinse and repeat the same thing every day, not in a bland way. It's just, if I have structure, there's order, and with order becomes, just calm and peace. Even when you're going through, fires are going to pop up. I call myself a professional firefighter. I mean, I'm literally putting fires out, but the thing is I'm structured. I account for those things, but the fitness and having the trainer and the dietitian allowed me to focus on my net objective, which was building the physical structure, the shell that I wanted, which is going to give me the confidence because I set some goals that I wanted to do health-wise. And when I started going to work on myself, it was like a springboard because now I was standing taller. I felt like the person that I saw in the mirror before was not strong and confident. Now I had the confidence and I had the strength, but I had the mindset and the life lessons. So I had a competitive edge at that point. Yeah. And the funny thing is it literally just started out that I wanted to get the confidence. And I remember even my boss at the time was like, you don't have the bone structure for it. Cause I was saying, hey, like I want to get into this fitness thing. And people around me made fun of me. The funny thing is I don't take anything, I don't do anything halfway. So I started doing this thing. And next thing you know, I was like, hey, you should do a bodybuilding show. Well, within like 9 months, I won Mr. Ohio as a bodybuilder. Like who does that?
Damn, dude.
Yeah, dude. So I literally, just wanted to get in better shape and feel better about myself. But hell, 9 months in, I ended up winning first place Mr. Ohio. And then
wild. Yeah.
Wild. So like, I mean, you just never know what life's going to give you. So for me, what I wanted to do just to get confidence ended up becoming kind of like a parallel career for me. So flash forward a year from that, I ended up turning pro. So now the bodybuilders and the people that I was idolizing, the people I wanted to look like, let's get it straight. I'm not like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm not like a huge dude, but I fly in that physique lane when I'm marketable. So I became an Abercrombie and Fitch model. I'm on covers of hundreds and hundreds of book covers and magazines and all this stuff for the physique that I wanted, coming from the kid that had the least likely frame and physique, you know what I mean? It ended up being so like here to this day, I've got the control, I've got the lifestyle, I'm healthy, I'm living the life. I got a young appearance, I take care of myself, but it all came down to those choices, all those years ago, when I was, in my mid 20s. So for me, I got the confidence, but I ended up really just following through on the commitments that I made to myself, which then allowed me to pour from a full cup. And then that translated into my business. And then when I felt better about myself, I had more confidence. So then when I started really getting into some serious relationships, I valued myself. I valued my time. I had the confidence. So I didn't put myself into some of those relationships that I maybe had in the past that didn't serve me, that weren't right for me. And maybe I wasn't right for them. You know what I mean? So just collectively, when I started to work on myself, business was good. The money was good, but I wasn't confident and I really needed to work on myself. So a lot of people here really lean into that schedule, get regimented, do the 75 hard, but do it, go all in. Because once you start doing that, and that's why I ended up writing a book, because I've had these life lessons. Fitness is key. If you're putting the time in, you've got to be able to handle the stress and have the workload. If you're fit and you're trim, your mental clarity is clearer. You're able to make decisions. You're able to process information better. And I know for you're super healthy. I think you're working through a rehab and an injury right now from activity. So, but the thing is I know I'm getting long-winded, but really just want to dial into, your schedule and making sure you're doing that, but really working on the physical fitness, because again, it all kind of ties in.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. In that realm is the way I, just like you did in terms of building self-confidence and pulling yourself out of that space of whether that was situational depression or anxiety or whatever. I utilized lacrosse as my outlet. That's what actually turned my entire life around when I was 21 years old. I was in a very bad place. My parents were getting divorced. It was very nasty. Things were going completely awry. And the only thing that I had was school and lacrosse. Those were the only two things that I had. So I poured myself directly into those and I went all in, like you said. And within a matter of that season, from November 1st, when I went home and shit just hit the fan, to the end of that season where I ended up being the highest scoring midfielder in the country. And it started to build that self-confidence that, again, it's taken me years to get to, but it was like that small foundation that really needed to be built. And it all came through athletics and fitness.
the cool thing, there's kind of two things that happen there. Like, that's amazing, because a lot of times, people in your situation, they clam up, they fold, they don't lean into their fitness. They would have just quit everything. That happens a lot. I think people are motivated by two things. They're either motivated by pain or pleasure. I think for you may have had a little bit more intensity because you had gone through that pain. So you were probably, maybe you had a chip on your shoulder, you know what I mean? Maybe you had a little extra, just a little that extra sauce that you were channeling. That I think that's, what I'm talking about, because
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes.
You know how it is. I know there's times where if I had a little bit, you can kind of take some of that energy out, but maybe that pain you redirected instead of, directing it internal and self-internalizing and doing that, man, you just played hard as hell and you probably hit hard as nails and you're going to have to do it on the field. And that's a good way to do it, right? So that's awesome.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I'll never forget senior year coming off the field. I hit this dude. I knocked him out off the face off, and my coach comes over to me and goes, "That dude just ran into a Mack truck." And that's how
I didn't know that story, but exactly what I said is what I think I called it, right? So that's amazing.
Yeah, you totally called it. Yeah, totally called it. That's good.
Yeah, you got to channel it some way. So my thing is, if you're going to play hard and win. So good for you, man. That's awesome.
Thank you. But that made me, and I'd love to know your thoughts on this. That forced me to embrace a darker side of myself.
Oh, yes.
Right. And that darker side of myself came out, which eventually actually helped me become a better person. Because, and the reason why I say that is when you develop that when you identify the motivation, and then you've got the dark end of things that are pushing you, right? You eventually get to the point where you get enough lessons in utilizing that as your source of motivation that you start to learn that if I got to take control of this, otherwise I start breaking shit.
Yeah.
Right. So there is that whole development cycle, like you said, right? Like, you go from this one area of lack of self-confidence to embracing that darkness to then being able to regulate it. So you're channeling it in the proper way. I'm curious, what's your experience been like with that? Or have you ever thought about that?
I very much understand the dark side, because you in the cartoons, right? It's like the angel and then you got the devil, right?
Yeah.
But Tim Grover, he was the, I don't know if you read the book Relentless. So he talks about the dark side. And you know how sometimes you may have heard something before, you've heard things over and over again, and I've even gone and I've spoken to groups, large, small, high network, low network, people just starting out or whatever. And you say a lot of the same things. You're not really saying anything revolutionary, but you might say one thing and it really triggers someone, or it really speaks to them that day. Like they were then ready to, receive that information. Well, Tim Grover in the book, Relentless, he says, everyone's born relentless. We're taught to relent. And I'm so glad you started talking about the dark side, because what did I say that life does to you? So you're born relentless. You're born with no fear. You're born with no concept of failure or whatever. Like you're learning to walk, and man, every time you get up, you fall back down on your ass, but you can't comprehend what's going on. You just say like, I see them people walking around. So like if the kid was like 40 years old trying to walk, like after a couple of times falling down, you're gonna be like, I'm just gonna hang out down here. It's not that bad after all. And I'm safe, right? That's kind of what a lot of people do, and when you're young, you take the chances, but life kicks you in the nuts. And then you start laying down, you start playing it safe. Well, then you start playing it safe. You got regrets. You started talking about the dark side. The dark side, what, Tim Grover talked about, is what drives you. It's the side of you that maybe you have, and I have it. I've seen a lot, so I have the dark side. But the dark side is what makes you great. But there's always two sides of the coin. See, for me, what drives me, what gives me the purpose, what gets me the things that I want, and the work ethic, it's a double-edged sword, because what makes me great can also kill me. Because I can drive myself into a wall. I can crash and burn myself out. But along the lines, I've put checks and balances in there that have allowed me to, again, embrace it, touch in it when I need to be in there. Maybe it's ego driven. Maybe it's, maybe you're driven by, look, this is going to sound bad. And in the book, he's talking about maybe you're driven by lust, maybe you're driven by greed, but a healthy level of those things, not necessarily bad, depending on where you're at and what situation you're in. You understand? Because at the end of the day, we're still a caveman. Not that long ago, we had to go and hunt and kill. So the thing is, if you're in sales, yeah, you're not hunting and killing, right? But you're still going after you have to assert yourself. You've got to, so you've got to, negotiate that. And to play sports, you got to tap into like a killer instinct. It's either killed or be killed. So you got to tap into that. Luckily, we're not really in the Wild West frontier, but our minds aren't far off from that. It's not that many generations that we're in there, so that it's still in there. So I think the dark side is one of those things that if anyone listened to this podcast, listen to that, and especially that chapter, because it really spoke to me. You just have to learn to harness it. He talked about players that would sip on a little bit of alcohol to take the edge off before the game, not to be drunk, right? Or if whatever your release is, if that's what you got to do and that's what gets your competitive edge, do it, but keep a harness on it, because a lot of times it's a slippery slope. So my thing is in sales, they say every good salesperson has a little dirt underneath their fingernails, whatever. That's probably the dark side. But there's a level of, is it criminal? Is it not? There's always the ethical side of it. But what you always want to look at is making sure you're tapping into those things. If there's carnal needs that you have, or you're going after sales, whatever it may be, just make sure you harness it. But I would absolutely, everyone listening to this, go listen to that chapter on the dark side, because Tim Grover is the best person to put it into like words that I've heard ever. And it makes so much sense.
Yeah, it does. And it's a commonality, I think, in a lot of athletes, or a lot of high performance athletes, is they're willing to go out and do whatever it takes. I had a guy named Brett Moyer that played on my lacrosse team, on one of my select lacrosse teams in high school. And his thing, this is the first time I really was introduced to this, right? But he would get on the field, and he was captain, and he would stand in the middle of our huddle and be like, "This is our brotherhood right here. And everybody else on that field right there is about to die." And I was like, okay, let's go.
I mean,
right. And it was the mentality and approach of, hey, we're going to battle right now.
Yeah.
And no matter what, everybody standing right here is on your side. Everybody over there, doesn't matter what happens to them.
Yeah.
We're here to play, and we're here to win.
And that's good. The biggest thing that I want to then so when you're done playing sports, you're not going to play sports your whole life. So then you got to remember, then there's going to be times where you're not necessarily going to be on a team per se, to where you've got your brotherhood, but then sometimes you're going to be on a team, but maybe you're on a sales team, right? And technically the people on your sales team, you may look at like, well, I'm number one, because I know how it is when you get into sales. Like, you want to be number one. At least that's what I do. And I'm consistently number one, or in the top 2, 1, whatever, right? Then you start looking at your teammates as your enemy, which you can't really do, but it's like a friendly competition, right? So you just have to learn that nuance. And unfortunately, it took me until I was 30 years old to, I had this junkyard mentality, man. I was doing really well, but I was driven. You were talking about the dark side. See, I was driven by, I thought if you were doing well, you were taken from me. So where I grew up, if you were doing well, you're taking food off my plate. So therefore I'd have to step on your neck to ensure that, I got it. It's like I said, in my mindset, I was a junkyard dog. It was kill or be killed. So anyone that was in my proximity, if it was in sales or whatever, I was driven. Like, again, I was typically the top producer. I remember my first month in sales as a realtor. I mean, I think I sold 16 houses. Like, it's unheard of. But I was literally driven.
I don't know realtors right now that sell 16 houses in a year, dude. Maybe even like a year and a half.
Yeah, that's my first month in. That's what we did. And
congrats.
Doing new home sales. But what I'm saying is my 20s was literally me being kind of a junkyard dog. I was like burning it all down. But it served me well, because I was number one. I was doing the things, but it was also lonely because I was burning down the relationships. I was isolating myself. If I needed favors, I think it's part of the progression. And I think, like I said, a lot of the shit that I hadn't really dealt with as a young age, I had this chip on my shoulder. And it wasn't until I turned 30. And like I said, I think when the market took a big tank and you start kind of learning like, hey, like you may need to soften your approach. You can still get the same objective. You can still be the number one producer, but are you helping build others? And I think that's what I really started to learn. And I had to really let go. So the dark side of me wanting to be number one and finish first and win that competitive edge that I learned as an athlete, I needed to channel it and realize that if I'm doing well, I can help others. And then collectively, the team as a whole gets better. And then everyone then has upward movement. And that's when I started getting into managerial roles, as I had that mindset. And then that's what served me well. As I go in and I consult with, companies. We did that with health clubs, as we would go in and, build, train, develop, and build these clubs up. And yes, it's cool to hit your number, but it's also cool to train someone and they start hitting their numbers, and then it's exponential. Yeah. And then when your income is then tied to people under you that are doing well, now you're not just working on yourself like as a team, like you make more money. So it's one of those things to where the competitive edge that you learn in sports, it's one of those things that you just have to make sure that you don't eat your own teammates. Yeah. And unfortunately, when I was in my 20s, I was probably an absolute dick. And I look back on it and I'm sorry for that. But, again, I was young. I had to learn lessons. And now I definitely don't have that approach. I'm building bridges, not burning them down at this point in my life. So,
yeah, no, you and I share that actually very well. And I think that that's a really hard transition for athletes, right? That move into a job environment where it's like, yeah, this is your team now, right? But in reality, when you're in sales, everybody's like, no, you're competing against each other, and how to make that a healthy competition is on the leadership. 100%. They've got to be able to set those objectives and baselines and make sure people are not water cooler talking, I guess is the way you say it, right?
Yeah.
Right. But I've been through that transition myself. I actually noticed, and I went back into my 20s and I started thinking in my head, being captain of my lacrosse team in college, what I would have done differently then, knowing what I know now. And first of all, I had no idea what emotional intelligence was. Okay.
No,
so that's nobody teaches you that shit in college. Okay. Or in high school or anything. Like you said and alluded to earlier, being this alpha male, like we're supposed to be, oh no, don't show emotion. It's like, stupid. You want to lead people. You got to like actually tap into their emotions and learn about yours first. Right.
Yeah.
So I wanted to just ask you more about some of the trials maybe that you went through of moving from that producer role to that leader role. Mm-hmm. And if there are kind of like key habits that you have that still have followed you from kind of that transition point to now.
Yeah. I write a lot of, I'm here to talk, obviously the podcast, not here to try to sell books, but
you're cool, man.
Again, I don't ever want to do that, but I just want to make sure I'm bringing the value. But in my book, Align Your Empire, like I said, a lot of people are frustrated, right? I mean, they're frustrated. They may be killing it in business, but maybe their home life isn't doing well, right? I mean, you're trying to juggle all these things. So what I identified was 6 key areas. See, I've done things well. I've burned things down. I probably had to learn a lot of tough lessons because I didn't want to be told what to do. But sometimes the best learner is just life experience, right? The best educator is just going through life. And for me, maybe just being hard-headed, I didn't ask enough questions. So I probably could have, if I could go back and talk to myself, like, hey, you might want to be a little bit more receptive. But it served me well, right? So like I said, in my 20s, I was very much the junkyard dog. So, through the life lessons, I started really looking at, key thing you need to look at is your mindset. My mindset then is I had the right goals. I wanted to produce, I wanted to sell. I had, motivational goals that I wanted. But again, you were talking about earlier, like you have a set idea of what you want and how you want to get there. Well, you could be like me and literally burn all the bridges down and step on everybody's throats and you can win, right? But then like it's empty, it's hollow because you got there, but like there's no one else to celebrate with because you've ran everybody off, right? That was me. So my mindset, I need to work on my attitude. I was 25 years old. I wasn't the 13-year-old kid that came home from school and was like, hey, your brother was murdered in a drug deal, right? But I was still carrying that, man. I was still carrying that resentment and all that stuff that was heavy. See, the thing is, we go through life, you try to carry yesterday's shit, and then you're dealing with today's. You can't carry that burden. For me, luckily, I channeled it into success, but I was burning everything down around me. I was burning relationships down. I was burning down business relationships because it was hell or high water. I'm getting mine. Fuck you. I'm getting mine regardless. And it'll serve you well. You'll get to the finish line. But like I said, there'll be no one else to share it with. So mindset, I needed to get clear on what I wanted, but I also needed to look at my methods to get there. It's not always about the end destination. It's about the experiences you go along the way, not trying to get too woo-woo, but it is.
Yeah, woo-woo. I'm a firm believer in the quality of your life is the quality of your relationships.
100%. And I had to learn that. It's like hard that I had to lose a decade, but I don't necessarily think I lost it. It just took me a little while for that to kick in. So I started looking at faith. People sometimes get weird when you start talking about faith. See, I do believe God has his hand on me in certain key areas. Still working on my mouth, but hey, we all have our battles. I'll drop an F-bomb every now and again. Sorry, Mom. It is what it is. But
good.
but for me, I feel like we're all given. I have God-given talents, and it is up to me to utilize those. Because if I don't, then that's a waste. It's a wasted of talent. And again, if I can use my talents to help better people, better myself, then how else? There's no other way to say you're building the kingdom. I mean, that's just what it is. But then faith is also, like I spoke to earlier with the anxiety, faith is also knowing that if you do today's work, you get everything done today, tomorrow will take care of itself. See, that's also faith. So mindset is key. That's not the foundation. There's not one that's more in a hierarchy. They all kind of play hand in hand, but mindset is crucial. Make sure we're working on the mindset. Then you got your faith. I just said, lean in on your faith. Then you got your family. So you have your blood family, right? But then you also have like your family of choice, which are the people that you choose to do life with. So your family of choice is the people that you choose, not just because, this is my brother. Well, if people in your family are treating you bad, like you may want to put a little distance in that relationship. You don't necessarily cut them off, but if they're treating you bad and they're pulling you down, like that's not good for your mindset, right? Yes, they're your family, but you don't necessarily need to have that type of negativity in your life. So what you'll find sometimes is the family of choice actually will become even stronger bond than your family, because these are the people that you're choosing. You're not by default. These are alignments that you're seeking, that you have a commonality, and together you work together. So family is crucial. Then I started looking at like your fitness, and I'd spoken earlier, like with your fitness, like you have your physical, your physical fitness, which is, like your physical. But again, we need to work on the mental side of it. Are you doing the mental work? Do you have a way to release some of that energy? Again, you and I, we come from a sports background. Well, you don't play lacrosse anymore. So you're not able to go over there and just knock somebody's ass out. So how can you channel something that still gives you that release? But I think a lot of times people stop losing their hobbies. So the mental side of it, what are you doing to decompress? Me, I like cars and motorcycles. I go rip 200 miles an hour on my Ducati. It's almost like a reset. People are like, what's it feel like? Honestly, it calms me down. I'm typically listening to classical music when I'm ripping on my, one of my motorcycles. So everything's different. But the thing is you've got to work on these areas. And in my book, I just started really identifying these places, and everything becomes intentional. And again, it's just coming back to, the key areas that you're working on. Like I said, there's 3 other ones that I wrote about in my book, but it's really just making sure you're putting the work in and you're being intentional. And unfortunately for me, it took me longer for that to come around. But as you can see, the work that you've done on yourself, it casts a bigger net. It's going to draw people to you. When you're someone like me that's hard driven, I found myself being a tugboat. I was constantly like dragging people across the finish line because I was ruling by like, do this, where are your numbers at? Well, I started learning about myself, and I became more like the lighthouse, to where I was drawing people in. I was the life lessons that I learned, I was applying them, and it was attractive. I became the attractable character. So people were then drawn to me. So again, I got people to perform. I got people to hit their number. I got people to do the work at hand. But again, it comes back to, how do you want to get there? Do you want to be the tugboat, or do you want to be the lighthouse where people want to follow by example? So that's kind of, again, long-winded, of course, by me, but that's it, man.
That is the masterful approach of how to put it, though, in terms of getting what you want out of life, is identifying first, if I could break it down, identifying what you want, then becoming, doing the simple habits that are getting you closer to that ideal person that then attracts the other people who are doing the same things.
Yeah.
And eventually you find people, like you said, your family of choice that you really connect with and you could build with. And I know, you're an investor, you do business with multiple people, you own your own business, you own, motorcycles, cars, all these cool, amazing things. And you just do not get there without being that person that attracts the right people into your life.
No, you don't. And, the thing is, like I said, I use the lighthouse and tugboat thing. I don't know if some of the people that are listening, but there's a forum or a Facebook group on there called Sales Talk with Sales Pros. Yep. And you always know when people first join, I don't know if there's 100,000 people. It might be. There's a lot of people in that group.
It's
big.
It's crazy.
What you'll find is the people that come in, and this is like a perfect example of someone's like, well, I got to start networking or whatever. They come in and like, this is what I sell. And this is, let me know. Like, they're always trying to sell something or whatever it is. I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to be sales, but you always see these people that come in, they're brand new into their group and they're just start dumping on what they do and how good they are. And this is what they do. And this is what I sell. And like, people are like, hey, like, what are you doing? Like, you need to build the value. So a lot of times you got to learn that nuance, right? A lot of times coming into certain things, if you're stepping into a new business, like building the relationships first is key. And again, I'm not talking woo-woo here. I'm not talking about we all sit around and share life stories and cry. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is be very intentional with what you're doing. If my mindset's not right, I'm not going to be able to attract the people because I'm not going to be able to attract the right people. Like they say, your network is, your net worth is your network and all that. You hear all that stuff, but you hear it, but like, hear me out when I say that. If your mindset's not right and you're not a disciplined person, like, you're not going to be able to attract the people that you want. You're going to be bringing in the bad relationships and the bad business deals. And for me, a lot of things that I do, I go off of feel. I trust my gut, because even if someone comes to me and they have the pedigree, they check all the boxes, like, there still has to be a relationship there, because just because they check all the boxes, if you're dating, I was like, if you're dating someone and they're beautiful and they check all the boxes, but like, if there's no connection there, that's not a good deal. Sometimes you can run all the analytics you want, but it's not a good fit. Luckily for me, I come from the street. Like I told you, I'm not necessarily the most book smart. And for me, I need to rely on relationships. So I've got a couple of key people. I call them my board of advisors. They're like in my inner circle. And if I've got something that I want to put some money in or something that I need to run by, I literally just say, hey, what do you guys think of this? So I'm seeking counsel from people that I've drawn into my life. I'm not asking anything from them. These are people that I'm choosing to do life with, but we look out for each other. Like, hey, I'm going to maybe put some significant amount of money into this. They're like, let us take a look at it first. And it's not even a monetary thing. It's just let me look out for you, brother. Things like that. So as an investor, having those key relationships, but I'm going to tell you, sometimes you've got to get in proximity of some of these people. You hear a lot of times people, I was never in a fraternity, but you hear about people like, I'm not going to pay for friends. I'm not going to do it. It's weird. Sometimes you may have to join a mastermind group. You may have to join some of these groups because, where I was from, I didn't have a lot of successful people around me. God gave me the gift of the dream. So I was always seeking and reaching up. But, in life, when you become an adult, it's kind of harder to make friends. So I ended up investing thousands of dollars, $30, $40, $50, $60,000 a year to be in some of these groups. But the thing is I need to be in proximity of people that are winning in life. I want to look at who do I want to be at? Because even as you get more successful and you start winning in life, well, there's always someone doing more than you, but it's not necessarily like money. It's I see someone and they're winning and their families they've got good families and they're prosperous and they're building businesses and they're thriving. They're not just alive, but man, they're thriving. Those are the people that I want to be around. See, I was born into dysfunction. I've always wanted to raise myself out of it. Sometimes you'll find yourself in dysfunction. It is what it is. Yep. But the thing is being able to seek those relationships. So again, I'm in some different masterminds that some people are like, wow, how do you invest in that? But again, when you're in those rooms, you're seeking the proximity of people that are doing well. But at the same time, you're going to build those relationships because in a transactional world that we're in now, a lot of those relationships down the road are going to end up paying off, and then you end up investing with people, and then next thing you know, we started building businesses together, and a lot of it was just because I sought to invest in myself, to put myself in those rooms again, proximity. So again,
100%.
that's how we met, and we had conversations. You're still learning a lot about you now, even though we've had a lot of conversations. So
yeah, it's cool, man. I mean, and I'm a big advocate of that. And what you had said with the board of advisors, right? I have my own. I've never heard it that way. I've actually heard it as board of directors. That's how I think of it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But
I'm the director. They advise.
Yeah. There you go. Right. And
Yeah.
it doesn't. And to your point, it does not have to be just in business. Like people who are winning in family, fitness, faith, all those things. Like that's the board of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Just like you would have a board maybe on your business, you got a board in your life. And that's one of the most impactful things that I learned actually pretty early on is trying to find a mentor or find somebody that could help me even before I even knew what that was.
I know.
Coaches, right? You have coaches in that you connect with. And my 8th grade coach, high school wrestling coach, saved my life. Hands down, saved my life. And thankfully that carried over into so many other areas in my life too. So, and like you said,
man, it's so funny you say your 8th grade coach. So mine was in 10th grade when I was in high school. There was I went to Columbus West High School, and it was kind of a bad school. Like we our freshman year, we had like 650 kids. Like we graduated 150, just to give you an idea of like how truly
whoa.
Give you an idea. Yeah. So, but there was in troubling times, was always like an oasis. But I had a teacher, Mr. Wallace, and I was one of those kids that he was like, "You're the smart." What does he say? You're the dumbest, smartest person I know. I just would I would make stupid mistakes, and I'll never forget it. On the back of his business card, and it was all out of love. Like his daughter was kind of like a girlfriend. I kind of dated his daughter in high school a little bit. Like, I don't know, like high school girlfriend. I mean, I'm serious, but I did. But he wrote on the back of a business card, he put, "You have to be responsible." We underlined it like 3 times. I kept his business card, and "You have to be responsible." That thing turned to dust in my wallet. And every time, like as silly as that is, man, there's always that one person in your life. Maybe it's a coach or a teacher, and God bless the teachers for doing what they do, because they get a lot of right now, and coaches and things, but all these years later, earlier you said New York Times bestselling author. I actually, as much as I want to say I was a New York Times bestselling author, I didn't make that list, but I made no, you're good. I was number 3 on the Wall Street Journal. I made the USA Today bestseller list, Barnes and Noble, number 1 on all the Amazon. So I hit some lists with the New York Times next book. But I wrote him. I had called him, and I hadn't talked to him in a long time. I ended up seeking, but I called him, and I told him the story, because something insignificant of him writing down on the back of the business card was very pivotal in a lot of the decisions that I made, because even all these years later, I hear, "You have to be responsible." And he probably didn't even remember it. And I sent him a copy of my book, and I wrote, "Thank you for all those years ago. Like I finally am living the life, responsibly." That's what I put in there, and I thank you for it. But I'm glad your coach saved your life, because I really do think that those relationships when you're in that age are so pivotal. And a lot of times it's not your parents, it's someone on the outside that may be saying the same things, but again, you are more receptive maybe from him than other people because of that relationship. So that's awesome.
I could not agree with you more on that. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. My parents could tell me no all the time, but if I heard it from Jay, it was like, okay, I'm not doing that.
What I mean? It's like, come on, man.
What's going on? What's going on? So, no, man, I really appreciate you dropping all of this, man. And I want to be respectful of your time too. I'm sure you got some stuff to do, but I'm happy to continue this conversation, unless you want to leave the listeners with anything in particular.
I mean,
today.
I got a little bit of more time, man. So if the time crunch, cool. I've got a little more time. So, we just rock and roll and we go from there. Let's say do maybe 2 more questions, and then we'll do a wrap up if you got it.
Yeah, man. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So identifying your board of advisors, I would love to know, how you had mentioned building relationships, getting in the right rooms,
Mhm.
right? And people get scared of that. Going back to the fear that we were talking about earlier is like, oh my God, I'm going to like drop every last dollar I might have into this. Right.
Yeah.
And I don't recommend that to anybody, by the way. Okay. But like multiple levels and engagement, within those rooms, which you, just like you said, when you start walking, like you got to crawl first, then you got to walk, you're going to fail a little bit, then you're going to learn how to run, and then you're going to start sprinting. So can you talk about, what your transition has been like within those groups, and additionally how you have been able to identify the board of advisors that you had mentioned before?
Yeah. So if I could, I think, did you ask if you could go back? You'd said something when you were talking about lacrosse. If you could go back with the mindset that you have now, how would you have approached sports and things like that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think as much as even when I was in kindergarten, my report cards were like red. It was like, defies authority, doesn't list well, talks too much, all this type of thing. So like on paper, bad, right? I don't fit in the conventional student box. But had we had the type of teacher and the leadership we have now, they were like, this kid is an entrepreneur. Like this kid he's self-driven. He doesn't fit in the box, but that's okay. See, I think that times are more open to that now, right? So a lot of things that I was told, sit down, be quiet. I was always asking the questions, and I wasn't asking the questions out of defiance. I was asking the questions because I had this thirst of information. Yes, it was unconventional, but when you're young, you don't process things like that. It's very black and white. It isn't until we get older that we start introducing gray and we start overcomplicating things. You know what I'm saying?
Yep, 100%. Yep.
So you asked me how I came to the realization on some of these things. Well, I started realizing that I didn't have all the information, and I started looking at, when I was in high school, Tiger Woods was like on it, like 97, winning the Masters, super young. Tiger Woods had a coach. Michael Jordan, he had a coach too. Oh, come to find out, on top of his coach, he had an individual strength coach. Even the best players, even the best people, the best minds have a council. They have a board of directors, a coach, a swing coach, a strength and conditioning coach. See, the thing is a lot of the times, big picture, yes, you got a coach, but then individually, what are you doing individually to work on yourself? Me, when I first started out, I remember when I was 15 years old, my dad's like, read this book. It was How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I was like, oh God, I was so
Carnegie.
embarrassed. Yeah, Dale Carnegie. I was so embarrassed. I was like, I was so embarrassed because like the name of the book, I was like, the hell with this? Like I can make friends. But for whatever reason, man, I hated reading textbooks in school. I hated all of it because I never understood why I would ever really need it, because I knew in my mind, like this isn't practical information that I'm going to utilize in the real world. But for whatever reason, at 15, I opened this book up. It started speaking to me. It was like I was learning like a lot of the things that, asking more questions, and you have 2 years, you've got, what I mean? Like you've got 2 years of listen, you've got one mouth, 2 ears, you start listening, ask people things, engage more. Well, for me, I started learning that I need to ask more questions, because if building the relationships, like asking more about the other person. So I read that book, and I remember like we went out to eat or whatever, and we were at this booth, and I was listening to this conversation going on behind me, and this guy was on a date, and he was just talking about himself the whole time. Like, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And like, I'm like, he's blowing it. He's blowing it. So at 15 is when I started realizing about the self-development thing. Then I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Then I read Think and Grow Rich. Man, I was like, there's a whole other world out there. Like, I'm not that weird. Like I felt like an alien. But the thing is, when you're different, see, different scares people. Then I started realizing that like Dale Carnegie and Robert Kiyosaki and all these people, they were my mentors now, but they didn't know it. And it wasn't until years later that I started developing and getting the true capital that I have now, that I can actually, if I wanted to, I could hire these people. Obviously they're not dead, right? but I could hire these people as my personal coach. Like, think about that. So at first, a lot of these people that were my mentors, man, like crazy to think about that. Well, check this out. I like I told you, I wanted to become like doing the fitness thing. You know, Jay Cutler was the Mr. Olympia. Like everyone knows who that is, not the quarterback, but Jay Cutler, the bodybuilder. I idolized him. Him and, you know, Ronnie Coleman would go back and forth in the 2000s. Well, guess what? I look like him, kind of. Just a smaller version of him. So my Superman, that's who I idolize. Brother, he's one of my friends. We talk cars and we run shop. He say, hey, man, how's the family doing? Right. How's business? So what happened through this whole thing as I was getting better and I was reaching up and I was pouring into these relationships is people that I was aspiring to be, aspiring to look up in business are now my friends. I'm not talking about like people you know as acquaintances, but I mean truly your friend, like people that I can call. These are my advisors, brother. These are people that I have put myself into these rooms because I had the confidence. I put my stuff out there. I took the risks. You know, it's just, that's the biggest thing. And then having the fortitude to know that if I can have a coach and get out of my own way, I don't have all the answers. But if I want to get to somewhere quicker, we talk about, we can get to the same place on the map. Do you want to row a boat or you want to get on a freaking, you know, you want to get on a speedboat or whatever? My thing is like, if we're going to get the end result, I want to get there quicker because once I get there, we already know how our minds work is what's next. You know, it's like, it's not always about making more money. It's about growing and how I can help other people. And so that was the biggest thing I started learning is sometimes you got to pay for the proximity and you can't always quantify. There isn't always an ROI that's like, I'm not a super tech person. If it makes sense, I make the decision. But a lot of times people get in the weeds. Well, it doesn't necessarily like, you know, you put this much in, how do you get out? Like inconclusive. I don't know if putting 60 grand into this thing, but I can tell you $60,000 to be in a room with people that have a network like some of our friends that we have. I don't care what it takes. I'll spend the money because the relationships that I've built and really me not going in there on the take. It's just being a sponge and being in these rooms and being like a sponge, man, and soaking up the information. Now that I know, I have the confidence because I got people over me that are doing better than me or doing more numbers than me that I want to aspire to be. They're like giving me the cheat sheet. They're giving me the cheat code on how to get there. And if I run into any roadblocks, I'm not the big fish in a little pond, man. I'm the one that I go to them for help because they already have been through it. They can help me. I can get there quicker. Collectively, mastermind, everyone has, you know, everyone's got their minds in there. Collectively, we should be able to do more. So I was able to see that and notice that and not worry about 60,000 or 30,000 or 10,000 or 5,000. I didn't overextend myself. I think it should be a little uncomfortable. I think it should be a little uncomfortable so that you do the work. See, a lot of times people sign up, they do all this stuff, they read the books, but they don't do the work. They just think that like they go through the motions, right? So
they're like, that was the work, but then I didn't do anything with it.
Right.
Oh,
so
wait,
a lot
it's
of
just
things,
supposed to work, right?
Yeah.
If I just watch the course or I read the book, it just works, right?
Yeah, you just got to do the work.
It does not work like that.
Yeah, man. So the thing is I know a lot of times, you know, for me, it was just making sure I've got people above me that are obviously keeping me humble, keeping me grounded, but also when I aspire to do more, you know, where I came from, it was always like, how much is enough? You know, are you're driven by greed? I had these weird things around me, man, but it wasn't, I was driven by greed. God was giving me what I call like divine tension. See, the thing is you can be happy with what you have now and have, you know, goals moving forward. It's not always about money, but the thing is, you know, you always want to be forward thinking. You always want to try to, you know, get better and grow. And how can you grow your influence? And how can I pull more people up? That's where I'm at in my life now is how can I get more people? How can I touch more people? Write this book, all these things like who am I? I grew up on the West Side, Columbus, single mom, like all the things. Who are you to write a book, right? But these are things that I've learned along the way that I put these lessons in, and I'm getting emails, I'm getting text messages and DMs of people that have helped me. I had a guy that said, man, I was literally going to kill himself, but there's, you know, a time in my life where I was in that boat too. And I've had people, man, like, I'm so thankful I read this book because you helped me get out of the hole. So as I'm pouring into these relationships and I'm doing these masterminds, man, I'm doing the self work. I'm putting the work in and I'm growing financially. I'm growing relationally. I'm growing my relationship with God. And I'm just, again, connecting with you. So again, this is where I don't know what our paths are down the road. If we do business together, it doesn't matter. But if I can bring value to you, you bring value to me, some way or another, we're going to like it's better for all of us, you know? So that's just kind of where I'm at. And if people are listening to this right now, start somewhere, you know, read the books, do the work, join the group, pour in value, build relationships, be more instead of being transactional where everything is about now, but maybe it's build the relationships because the money will always come. It's just, again, the end result. You'll get the end result. You'll get what you want. If you want to be successful and you want to be a power of influence, like, you'll get there. It's just doing the right things along the way and putting the work in. There's really no shortcut. But again, when you're building these relationships, you're going to be able to, you know, maybe get there quicker or get there in a healthier way if you just simply ask for the help. But you also have to make sure you're in the rooms to ask for the help, you know? So
yeah, absolutely, man. I couldn't agree with you more. And you had mentioned something earlier that you built the confidence first in terms of then investing into yourself and knowing that you had that confidence. So if you guys are listening out there and you're, you know, working through that portion of it, you and I right here, Burton, are testaments to exercise is a keystone habit that can take you in so many great directions in your life. Mm-hmm. If you just focus there, if you are worried about I got all these things that I want to accomplish, focus on one thing first. And I always recommend exercise, just like you do, because of what it does to your brain. It releases endorphins in your brain, dopamine rush. It actually helps you push physical barriers and become like tranquil with your brain and your body. So when you get those times of exhaustion or decision fatigue, they come a lot. You have a much longer fuse than you do when 100%. You don't exercise, right? I wanted to ask you this because I think that this is a really cool question that I got posed at one point. But you had mentioned it too earlier of, you know, when we were talking about relentless, right? And the Michael Jordan, and do you want to be the tugboat or the lighthouse? This is a really interesting question I got posed at one point. Okay. And I'd love your answer.
I like good questions, man. I like this.
So I got asked this and it was, who would you rather be? Would you rather be Michael Jordan or would you rather be Derek Jeter? And right? That's a really tough question. Like, damn it.
I mean, I'm going to say I think I would rather be Michael Jordan for sure. Michael Jordan, if you guys don't know, he was like I was in my 20s. You hear about the stories to where he demanded so much of himself collectively. If you look at those teams, your Scottie Pippins, your who was Steve Kerr.
Steve Kerr was on there. Yeah.
Like Dennis Rodman. Who else was on that? Who else was on? There was
Coach.
Coach
on that team too. Yeah.
So think about it like this. So Michael Jordan, I think it was Steve. Did he punch? He punched him, right? He punched someone in the face.
Steve Kerr, I think, punched Jordan in the face in practice.
Michael Jordan punched him in the face.
Oh, was the other way?
Oh, yeah, okay. It was the other way around.
Okay. It
was the other way around. So the thing is Michael Jordan made everybody better on the team. Like, his demand for excellence. Some may say maniacal. Some say it's brilliance. I mean, it really just depends on how you want to look at it. But needless to say, you either get on the bus or you're off. I mean, that was really his approach. He was, but that was like me in my 20s. So the thing is he was a hard driver. But when you look at that team collectively, each individual player, were they great or did they rise to, sometimes it takes a coach or a player to get the most out of you. So maybe his approach was pretty hardline. I mean, I think punching another player in the face is probably not going to be good for team morale, but hey, they won a shit ton of championships. So my thing is like, I don't know.
Get the result? Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know. It's kind of hard to say because they got the result. So again, maybe we're talking about, you still get to the same destination. It was that the ideal way. I bet now that he's older, he probably looks back and being like, yeah, I could probably maybe choose a different method, but it did serve him well. So I think the biggest thing for him is that he was constantly trying to evolve. So yes, he was a basketball player. I think when his pops died, he ended up trying to go and play baseball because he always wanted to play baseball. So I like that. I like that even when he was the greatest of all time, he was able to walk away and try something new and then ultimately came back to finish finish some needed work. And then obviously then he spun off and then obviously got his apparel line and he's got his shoes. And then if you guys know anything, I'm big into racing. He's into the auto, he's into, you know, that whole thing too. So I think it's pretty cool. So I think Derek Jeter's cool, but if you ask anyone, Derek Jeter or Michael Jordan, they know his shoes, they know everything else. So I think that's an easy answer, Michael Jordan.
Okay.
So I guess my thing is I want to know how you answered it.
Thank you. I said the same, actually. I said
thinking you were going to say Jeter, but I don't know why. I think I was just.
The reason why I thought about it so hard is I was like, okay, Jeter's got, like, there's not many people that will say bad things about Jeter and how he went about his leadership, right? But there are a lot of things out there that talk about Jordan and how hard of a driver he was. And like you had mentioned, right? Like the altercation between him and Steve Kerr, right? But the way that we look at it, or the way that we're like taught in a lot of ways, is to avoid that type of conflict when it's necessary to get the end result, like they did, right? Consecutive championships, and being in the championship 7 years in a row doesn't come without having all of that done, right? Or that type of mentality. What I think is a shame about the way people portray Jordan is the fact that, oh, he was a hard driver, but they also, if you talk to people in a little bit more of a private manner, they talked about how present he was all the time. He was present. He was there. He was there to make you better. People finally, yes, they called him a dick. At most of his teammates were like, yeah, he was a dick. But you know what? I respect the hell out of him, and I wouldn't want to play with anybody else. So it goes back to this question of, would you rather be liked or respected?
Yeah.
And yes, there's a favorable part of being both.
Yeah.
But if I had to choose one or the other, I'd rather be respected than liked.
And that is a very, very, I like that question. I like how you kind of tied that in there, because I wasn't even thinking about that, but that's a really good point. Would you rather be liked or respected? I think a lot of times people would rather avoid the conflict and the uncomfortable feelings, and they would rather be liked. But then they find out that why those relationships don't necessarily serve them, because again, for you, what did you say? You were a good athlete. You did all that stuff, but you weren't necessarily doing it 100% for you. A part of you liked it, but a major driver is you wanted to live up to what your dad's expectations were, right? I mean, you said that. You wanted to be liked. You wanted to not rock the boat too much. So you went along with it and you learned to embrace it, but it wasn't full-hearted. It wasn't exactly what you wanted to do. So I'll have a question for you. I'll come back to that. So I think most people want to be liked. I absolutely want to be respected. But one thing that I've learned along the way is I think you can have both. I don't think it has to be all or nothing. I think at times you're going to have to make the uncomfortable decisions, but do you have the confidence to do it? Do you have the backbone to win 7 championships in your career? Do you have the backbone to look someone in the eye and say, you're not a good fit, I've got to let you go because it serves the team better? So, or maybe you're the CEO, but you're just not in the right position. Do you have the gut and the stomach, and can you let your ego aside to know that you're not in your own position? Maybe you started a company, but you're not in the right position anymore. It was a season. You got the business to this point. You've got 100 employees. Do you need to step out of the way in order for the company to grow because you don't have the vision and you don't have the fire in your stomach anymore? You know what I mean? That's where most people don't have that confidence. So for me, I think you can be respected, and I think that you also can be liked. But at certain times, you're going to have to lean in on the respect side. You're going to have to make the tough decisions. And at times, you're going to have to be the relational guy. And I think that's what's cool. And that dichotomy there, I think a lot of times people really try to go more towards being the diplomat, being liked by everybody. So the thing is, when you're liked by everybody, you're getting along, but you're not really making progress because you're going to make a lot of sacrifices along the way. And you're going to end up basically selling out is how I envision that myself.
Yeah.
So my question that I want to turn that is, if you wanted to play lacrosse what did you want to do, man? Like, if you could go back and do it, like you said, you played lacrosse, you didn't love it. What?
Oh, I loved it. Don't get me wrong. I love lacrosse.
I know, but what would you do that would have been for you? See, you didn't think.
Yeah, I would have. I would have started playing lacrosse earlier. That's actually the way that I would answer that. Is I begged my parents to let me play lacrosse when I was like in second grade, and they were like, "No, you're an all-star baseball player. You're gonna play baseball, right?" Okay. And I was lucky enough. I got recruited by 105 colleges, for lacrosse, but then I got recruited by another 50 colleges for wrestling. So I had an option. I just had you saw me, right?
Yeah,
I've had a shoulder replacement, right? I actually had 3 shoulder surgeries by the time I was 20. 2 of them were of which, like, I had both of my shoulders dislocated in wrestling matches. Yeah. And I broken my nose 5 times. So I was like, I've had enough. I've had enough. I can't breathe out of my face. Both of my arms are messed up. But if I could go back and I think do something for me a lot earlier, man, dude, I really think that I would have started playing lacrosse earlier, and I would have told my parents to get a divorce when they separated in second grade.
Good.
I would have. It's a good question, and I've never been asked that before.
I always like to put it back. But yeah, I didn't mean to stump you, but no, I think that's smart. And I think a lot of times, I don't know about your parents, but I know a lot of people go through divorce. And I think a lot of times, as husbands, sometimes, this is going to resonate with a lot of people, there's going to be times where, again, there might've been, a season where, with your partner and you brought kids into the world, but sometimes for the greater good for everyone, it might be better to end the relationship, like you said, in second grade, because again, you said it was 10 years down, basically, I don't know, 10 years down the road, right? About 10?
Until they got divorced. Yeah. And I was 21. They got separated when I was 8. Yeah. So about 15 years, but it took them 9 years to get divorced.
So my point is with that is
crazy.
Maybe they could have had that 9 years where they could have built and fostered a new relationship that would have served them better. Maybe they would have been happier earlier. You know what I mean? So I think about that sometimes. I think a lot of times you might be tormented to stay. Obviously, if you can save your marriage, do that. But, one thing I've learned is I've been in a lot of dysfunction growing up. And I think at times it might be better to split. Maybe you might be a better parent. Maybe it might just create a better household. Maybe you're better raising the kids separately in different homes, but it doesn't necessarily mean a broken home. It just means different homes together. And maybe that's someone, me trying to justify, things, but again, I sometimes I can see why you would have thought that, man. I mean, you were kind of right there in the middle of it. And I think a lot of times people try to do the right thing on paper and stay together for the family, but sometimes it's better. And you can do that even in business relationships, man. I think a lot of times people try to hang on, but a lot of times it might be better just to cut your losses and move on and start something new and build something that would be better, where you would be all in, full hearted, and not just, maybe in something out of duty. So
yeah, and that's fair to the kids too, because seeing you happy, right? If I would have been able to see my dad happy and my mom happy during that time, that's why I say that, is because they would have had those years to go and find someone different or find themselves. One of the coolest things that I've watched as a progression is my mom's development through this, from codependence to just badass.
Amazing.
Wild. Yeah, it's just it's very inspiring. I'm very lucky in that sense, because watching what she went through and pulled herself out of completely alone, right? It was very difficult for me to watch, but being on the other side of it now, I go, man, I just am very proud that you were able to become this person and let go of all of that and just, get in your lane and go.
Yeah, I love that. I love hearing that. That's awesome. Good.
Yeah. So it's great. It's it's inspiring for me. That's just one of the inspiring pieces in my life. And you got to meet her, so
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah. So, hey man, I really appreciate you being on here. Anything that like I said, that you'd like to leave the listeners with today?
Yeah, I do. Always have a lot to say, and sometimes I sound like I'm rambling. It's
No, not at all.
there's so much to say. I really feel like when I do some of these, I'm like, obviously we've got some history. We've talked quite a bit. I literally feel like I could talk to you all day. So
Sure.
I could. Maybe we do this again. But I just
Absolutely.
right
That's what I was
now,
thinking.
yeah. So I'll probably talk to you after this. But the biggest thing that I want to really hammer home right now is wherever you're at in life, maybe you're doing well in business, or you're getting ready to start something new, or it doesn't matter if you're just starting out or whatever. I just want to make sure that the listener, everything that we talked about today, you may not be able to relate to some of it, but one thing they always come back to is mindset. Like, what are you doing to feed your mind? Don't be afraid to make the decision. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? Like, every day we're not faced with life and death situations. We're just not. So it may feel like it at times. It may feel devastating or whatever. A lot of times people don't truly come out of their shell because they feel a fear of being judged. And especially now, you're judged so critically. But I will tell you, it took me 10 years to really step in and own who I was, because I wasn't confident. I was trying to be liked by everyone. I was trying to be everybody's friend. But the thing is you're kind of selling your soul a little bit at a time to try to get along with everybody, that you kind of lose yourself along the way. Mm-hmm. And it's not, I've heard people say, well, you've got mommy and daddy issues. It's not that. You are a product of your upbringing, but it's your choice to decide how you move forward. So I have taken the empathy, I've taken the things that I've learned along the way. Instead of being a victim, I've channeled it to how can I make things better? Now that I'm a father of 3 daughters, I look at how I'm not going to father them. And I look at how I'm going to raise them, because I knew what it felt to be their age. I mean, I'm 40, but man, I remember that. I remember, those times, like it really was like yesterday. Right. And as a father and as a leader of them, like I want them to grow and I want to foster them. And so a lot of times when you want to just say, sit down and be quiet, like I don't do that. I try to seek to understand before I pass judgment. I got a daughter that's young and she's encouraged. She's just wild and she's ready. Like, why would I want to tamper that? I want to foster that. She's born relentless. I don't want her to relent. I want to channel that to good. I want her to have the experiences, because the problem with me is I ended up sitting down and being quiet and reserved. And it gave me an identity crisis, because then the lack of confidence, the fire that I had in my gut, it went away because I let people tell me to sit down and be quiet. Because if you keep saying that to someone, eventually they lay down and quit. And you may be 35 or 40 years old and you feel like you want to quit, but there's something inside of you that keeps getting you up. Like, foster that. You're not in a dead end. You're not, like, you can decide. And maybe we're talking as entrepreneurs and you're a W-2 employee and you're like, yeah, this all sounds great, but I'm a W-2 employee. Well, guess what? That may be true, but check this out. Maybe you're lacking, or like with your kids and you work a ton and you're paid for your time, not necessarily maybe paid for your skills. So your schedule's 9 to 5. Well, maybe your kid has a lacrosse game and you're missing the kids' games. Well, maybe why don't you talk to your boss about maybe going in 7 to 3 so that you can go to those games in the evening. So the things you're paid for your time, not necessarily your skill. So I'm just trying to think of different ways to grow and get better. If you feel like you're in a dead end, like you're not, if you're in a relationship that's not serving you, leave, because you'll be better for it now. It may be tough now. You may want to avoid the pain, but sometimes in life, you're motivated by 2 things, pain and pleasure. Both can serve you well, but you have to channel it. You have to have the foresight, and that comes back to your mindset. So it all, like this conversation and all these funny things that we talk about, it all comes down to decisions made. Do the work, take the initiative, take the risk, because I'm telling you, if you look back and you have that I should have, I coulda, shoulda, woulda, I promise you that regret, that empty pit in your stomach is going to be so much worse than the temporary setback and failures that you think that you're going to experience. Because I promise you, the scenario that you're running in your head is significantly worse, because your mind is always going to think worst case scenario. So a lot of times your mind is going to make it out to be so much worse than it is. So take that risk, take that initiative, start that job, go after it, go all in, but make sure that you just take some sort of action. And I'm done preaching, brother, but that's
that was
with.
I'm over here taking so many notes. I'm like, this is amazing. All right.
Thanks.
No, all of you guys out there listening to this right now, Burton, you dropped a huge amount of knowledge, man. I mean, to wrap it all up into one thing, I can't. There's no way. You know, and I really appreciate it, because honestly, I learned some really cool things about you today. You know, your mindset, the things that you've gone through, and I would have never guessed that you and I had a lot of those commonalities in our lives, man. It's pretty wild. But you know, where can people find you out there?
Easy. I'm pretty active on Instagram. My name is Burton Hughes. So BURTON _Hughes, HUGHES _official. Make sure you really look at that. I'm here lately almost every week. I mean, you even give me that time, but there's some people trying to, you know, do imposter accounts. So if you know, get a DM from me or what you think is me, and it's asking you to invest in some type of crypto, I'm probably not going to DM that to you. And I'm probably not going to say, hello, how are you today? I guarantee you I'm not going to say that. But you can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook, Burton P. Hughes, you know, Facebook at Burton P. Hughes. You can find me on my own website, it's burtonhughesofficial.com. When you go on there, you know, I do have an app, and the app is kind of a cool way of, you know, again, nothing revolutionary, right? Things you may have heard, but it kind of goes along the lines of my book, Align Your Empire. But it has some cool ways for you to, you know, it's more of like an accountability tool for like your fitness, your faith, you know, your family, and all those different things I talk about in Align Your Empire. So it's kind of a cool way to, you know, just kind of check in with that. But I'm pretty active on there. I post some funny memes in my stories, but I keep it pretty light, but I'm pretty active on there. And you know, anybody questions that they have, I try to stay pretty active. And yeah, looking forward to maybe linking up with some people. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. I'm going to drop all of that in the show notes too. So you guys can access that there on any of the platforms that you're listening on. And Burton, again, my man, thank you for coming on to the Uncommon Element. You're certainly uncommon, man. This is freaking awesome.
That's good. Right, thank you, brother. Thank you.
So I look forward to seeing you the next time. And until next time, guys, thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. And this is Slick, aka Josh, and I'm out.